I live in a small house on the edge of Madison, Wisconsin, with my German Shepherd, Ranger. He's been my shadow since he was a pup, and by now he seems to know what I feel before I do. Even in winter, even when the temperature dips into the teens, Ranger expects his nightly walk. My yard isn't fenced, so every evening we circle the block, cut through the neighborhood park, and come back. 45 minutes like clockwork. That night the snow had just fallen, heavy and thick, the kind that turns the world into cotton and smothers every sound. If you've ever walked through a quiet Madison neighborhood after a snowstorm, you know the silence. It feels like the whole city is asleep under glass. I pulled on my boots, zipped my jacket, clipped the leash, and we stepped into that muffled white world. At first it was peaceful. Ranger trotted ahead, tail swinging, his breath puffing clouds into the air. But as we turned the first corner, something shifted. The silence felt crowded. Ranger froze, ears forward, tail stiff, staring back the way we'd come. Nothing moved. I laughed under my breath, tried to shake it off. Too many nights of scary podcasts, I told myself. Halfway through the park I heard it. Crunch. Not my boots, not Ranger's paws. A second rhythm, close enough that I could hear the snow compress under someone else's weight. I stopped. The other sound stopped. I moved again, so did it. My mouth went dry. Ranger's hackles rose and he kept looking over his shoulder, pulling at the leash. But when I turned, the sidewalk was empty, a tunnel of trees and yellow light. We reached the end of the park and stepped back onto the street. That's when I saw the proof. In the snow alongside my footprints and Ranger's paw marks was another set. Bigger than mine, sometimes beside them, sometimes overlapping like someone had walked right in my steps. My stomach dropped. This wasn't imagination. Someone had been with us the whole time. Home, I whispered, tugging Ranger along. He matched my urgency, muscles tight under his fur. I decided to test it. Instead of taking our usual side of the street, I cut across the road. If no one followed, maybe it was coincidence. But when I reached the middle of the street and glanced back, I saw him. A man was walking the opposite sidewalk, head bent slightly, but his eyes kept flicking toward me. He didn't wave, didn't act surprised, just kept pace, like this was normal. That was enough. I slipped my phone from my pocket and dialed 911. The operator answered on the second ring. 911, what's your emergency? This is Mara. Hearing a name grounded me. Hi, I think I'm being followed. I'm walking my dog, I'm about 2 blocks from home. Stay on the line with me, she said calmly. Can you describe the person? I turned to look again. The sidewalk across the street was empty. He was gone. He hadn't turned the corner. I would have seen it. He had melted into the row of yards and fences like he'd never been there at all. I forced my legs to move faster. He was tall, dark coat. I don't see him now. That's okay. Keep walking. We'll send officers to your area. Are you headed home? Yes. Almost there. My voice cracked. As my porch light came into view, relief washed through me, until I noticed the figure bent over my doorknob. For a moment I couldn't even process it. Just a man, standing on my porch, hand on my lock like he belonged there. Then he turned his head, and the light caught a plain black mask stretched across his face. Ranger went wild. The leash jolted my arm as he barked and snarled, teeth flashing. I couldn't stop the sound that tore out of me, half scream, half warning. The masked man flinched but didn't run. He stepped closer, like testing how close he could get before I broke. Who are you? Get away from my house! My voice came out sharp, shaky, too loud in the frozen air. Ranger lunged, claws scraping the porch boards. Finally the man backed up, raising his hands like he didn't want to fight a dog. Then, without a word, he vaulted off the side of the porch into the neighbor's yard. I heard the crunch of snow as he landed and then nothing. Just gone. Mara. I gasped into the phone. He was at my door, he tried to get in. Stay inside now. Officers are almost there. Lock the door. I fumbled the keys, shoved Ranger through the doorway, and slammed the deadbolt home. My whole body was shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. A minute later I heard the sirens. Red and blue lights spilled across the snow outside. 2 officers checked the porch, the yard, the fence line. I told them everything, the footsteps, the man in the park, the prints, the mask at my door. They listened carefully, faces serious. They came back after circling the block. "We found footprints through your neighbor's yard to the back fence," one of them said. "On the other side it looks like he was picked up. The tracks stop at the street where a vehicle must have been waiting." The words made my stomach twist. Picked up. Like someone had been waiting for him. "We'll patrol the area for a while tonight," the other officer said. "Keep your lights on, keep the doors locked. If anything else happens, call right away." When they left, the silence came back heavier than before. Ranger sat facing the front door, ears pricked, eyes fixed like he expected the knob to turn again. I barely slept. Every creak, every gust of wind against the siding felt like footsteps. The police never called again. No arrests, no updates. Just that night, hanging in my memory like a shard of ice. I bought a camera the next day, pointed it out the front window. I started changing our routes, cutting them shorter, sometimes skipping them altogether. But winter has its routines, and life has its patterns. You can only break them so much. Even now, when the snow is heavy and the world goes quiet, Ranger sometimes stops mid-stride, ears forward, watching the dark behind us. And in those moments I remember the crunch of unseen steps and fresh snow, and the man in the mask reaching for my door. I worked the overnight shift at a 24-hour gas station just outside Des Moines, Iowa. It's not the busiest place in the world, but being off the highway means you get a steady trickle of travelers and truckers. I used to like the quiet of those nights, the hum of the refrigerators, the glow of the pumps under the canopy. But after what happened, I'll never feel safe working alone again. It was a bitter January night, around 2:30 in the morning. Snow had been falling on and off, and the lot was empty. I was behind the counter scrolling on my phone when something darted past the side window. Just a blur. When I looked up, there was nothing there. Maybe it was my reflection, maybe just snow shifting in the wind. I went to the restroom, locking the door behind me the way I always do when I'm the only one on shift. But when I came back, I froze. A woman was outside, pounding both fists against the glass entrance. Her face was red from crying, her hair tangled. She was barefoot, dressed only in pajama shorts and a thin long-sleeve shirt. The temperature was below freezing, and she looked like she'd been running through the snow. I unlocked the door, and she nearly collapsed inside. "Please, please call the police," she begged. Her voice was hoarse, her whole body shaking. I grabbed the cordless phone from behind the counter and gave it to her. She dialed 911 with trembling fingers, talking so fast I could barely follow. I heard fragments, taken from her home, dragged out by men. They were friends of her ex-boyfriend. She said she jumped out of their car when it slowed near an exit ramp and had been running ever since. Then headlights swept across the glass. An SUV pulled into the side lot and idled with its lights on. She saw it and dropped to the floor behind the counter. "That's them," she whispered, clutching the phone. Her voice was almost gone. "Don't let them in. Please." 2 men climbed out. Both tall, broad, in dark hoodies. One kept a hand shoved deep in his pocket, and I could see the faint glint of something metallic. They walked straight to the door and yanked on it. The handle rattled, but the lock held. I forced myself to walk closer with a mop and bucket in hand, trying to look casual. "Sorry, close," I said, my voice higher than I wanted. "Plumbing issue. If you need gas, you can pay at the pump." They just stared. One leaned closer to the glass, eyes narrowing. "We're hungry. How long's it gonna take?" I swallowed. "Toilet overflow. Health code. It'll be hours. There's a McDonald's down the highway, next exit." He didn't blink. Then the other one asked, "You see a girl come in here? Pajamas? Running?" My stomach turned. I tried to look like I was thinking, then shrugged. No. Not tonight. Silence. Just their eyes locked on mine through the glass. Finally, the one with his hand in his pocket slammed a fist against the door so hard the frame rattled. I jumped. He leaned in, his voice low enough that only I could hear through the glass. "If you're lying, I'll come back and smash your skull." I froze. My hands slick with sweat, gripping the mop handle like it was a weapon. And then, flashing red and blue lights lit up the lot. A patrol car pulled in fast, blocking half the pumps. The officer inside stepped out with one hand already near his holster. The two men stiffened, then looked at each other. With a smirk, they gave me the smallest wave, mocking, almost playful, before jogging back to their SUV. The tires squealed as they sped out of the lot and disappeared onto the highway. I rushed to unlock the door and shouted, "Those are them! That's them!" The officer sprinted toward the SUV, but by then it was already gone. He spoke into his radio, then jumped back in his cruiser to follow. For a moment the gas station was silent again, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Then I turned back to the counter. She was still crouched there, phone clutched tight to her chest, her face pale and wet with tears. I told her it was okay now, that the police were after them. She cried again, thanking me over and over. More officers arrived minutes later. They wrapped her in a blanket, listened as she told them the same story, about her ex, about the men dragging her from her home, about her desperate escape. I watched her leave with them, still barefoot, stepping gingerly on the salt-scattered tile. And just like that, the doors slid shut, and I was alone again. The lot was empty, but the echo of his words wouldn't leave my head. "If you're lying, I'll come back and smash your skull." Now, every time someone taps on the glass after midnight, my stomach drops. I see that SUV again in my mind. And I wonder if one night, when the lot is quiet and the snow is falling, it will pull back into the side lot and wait. My name is Ethan, and I was a biology student at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor when something happened that I still can't explain. It was 2 years ago, but the memory is as sharp as broken glass. What was supposed to be a routine ecology field trip became the night I realized how fragile the line is between safety and being prey. Our group was 9 people total, 8 students, including me, and 1 supervising professor. We drove north in a creaky RV loaded with gear. The plan was simple: hike into the forest, set up camp, and spend 2 days collecting soil and water samples from designated sites along streams. Pretty standard work. We arrived late in the evening. The air was cold, the trees skeletal, and the snow underfoot squeaked with every step. One student had brought a giant container of split-pea soup and generously offered it to everyone. I hate pea soup, so I passed. So did the professor and 1 other student. That choice ended up saving me, though I didn't know it then. By morning, 5 of my classmates were violently ill with food poisoning. They couldn't hike, couldn't even stand. The professor had originally been strict about rules: travel in pairs, no one out after dark, but suddenly, the timetable mattered more. "Do your best," he told us. "Just be careful." That was it. So I set out alone. My job was to follow a narrow stream upstream for about 4 miles, stopping every quarter mile to take samples. Easy on paper. In reality, it was a long slog through snow and uneven ground. By midday, I'd made it halfway. The woods were eerily still, no wind, no birds, just the trickle of water. I stopped for lunch on a fallen log. That's when I smelled it. Not campfire smoke, not pine. Cigarettes. Heavy, stale, like the inside of an ashtray that hadn't been emptied in weeks. I scanned the trees. Nothing moved. No voices, no crunch of boots. But the odor lingered. It was so strong I could almost taste it. "Hello?" I called, my voice breaking the silence like a stone in glass. No answer. I stuffed my trash into my pack and pushed on, forcing myself to breathe steady. After a while, the smell faded. I convinced myself it was some hunter passing through. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been watched. Hours later, at my final collection site, dusk was already bleeding through the trees. The forest was dim, and the shadows seemed to move when I looked straight at them. I crouched to scoop water into the tubes, and there it was again, that same foul smoke. This time my stomach flipped. Whoever it was, they hadn't just passed by earlier. They'd followed me. I yanked my flashlight from my bag and swung the beam through the trees. The white circle shook with my trembling hands. Every crooked branch looked like a crouching figure, every stump like someone hunched and waiting. The smell wrapped around me, clinging to the back of my throat. I bolted. I ran faster than I ever had with a full pack, stumbling on rocks and roots, flashlight jerking wildly. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but I didn't stop until the yellow glow of our campfire flickered through the trees. By the time I staggered in, it was after 10. Everyone else was asleep except the professor, who glanced up and said, "Long day?" I didn't tell him. I just crawled into my tent. Sometime after midnight, I woke up needing to pee. I slipped out into the trees, breath fogging in the cold. 100 feet from camp, I turned and froze. Out in the woods, maybe 50 yards away, a red ember glowed in the dark. It flared, then dimmed. Someone was smoking. I stood paralyzed, watching. The ember bobbed slightly, then lowered as if the person had taken the cigarette from their lips. Whoever it was, they weren't moving. They were just standing there, watching the camp. I crept back, forcing myself not to break into a sprint. Back at the RV, I shook the professor awake and whispered what I'd seen. His face hardened. He woke the other healthy student, and the three of us took turns on watch until dawn. In the morning, we searched the spot. Beneath the tree were at least 10 crushed cigarette butts, half buried in the snow. The bark was scarred with deep gouges, as though someone had been twisting a knife into it. The professor didn't hesitate. "We're done here," he said. "Pack up. Now." We left within an hour. Relief filled me as we bounced down the dirt road, until a battered white panel van pulled onto the road behind us. At first I thought it was coincidence. But it stayed. Mile after mile, turn after turn, it shadowed us. Even as we hit the main highway, it never pulled away. Only when we turned onto the University of Michigan campus in Ann Arbor did it finally peel off into the night. I told myself that was the end of it. But that evening, after unloading samples with the professor, I walked alone toward my dorm. The campus was quiet, lamps glowing weakly in the cold air. And then I smelled it again. Cigarettes. That same foul, rotting stench. My chest tightened. I scanned the path. 20 yards away, just beyond the lamplight, a red ember glowed. It lifted, flared, then dropped. I walked faster. Footsteps followed, crunching softly on the frozen ground. I risked a glance back and saw a dark figure trailing, the ember bobbing near his face. My body acted before my mind did. I ran. The footsteps pounded after me. My heart thundered in my ears. I reached my dorm, fumbling with my keycard. For a second I thought I'd drop it. The lock beeped green, and I yanked the door open, slamming it behind me. Through the glass I saw him stop at the edge of the path. For a long moment he just stood there. Then he flicked a lighter. For an instant his face was lit, scruffy beard, baseball cap low, eyes locked on the door. Then darkness again, just the ember glowing. By the time I raced up the stairs to my window, he was gone. The yard was empty. I never saw the van again. I never smelled that smoke on campus after that. But I still can't walk home alone at night without scanning the shadows. Because sometimes I wonder, was he just curious, or was he waiting for the right night, when no one would be around to hear me run? My name is Claire, and I used to think of northern Wisconsin as my favorite escape. Growing up near Wausau, I loved the endless forests, the quiet logging roads, the way you could walk for miles and never see another soul. But one trip changed that for me. Now, when people talk about how peaceful the woods are, all I can remember is the night I lay in a tent, listening to voices where there shouldn't have been any. It was the summer of 2019. My boyfriend and I had planned a 2-day hike along a remote section of the North Country Trail. We'd done plenty of backpacking in Wisconsin and Michigan's Upper Peninsula, so we thought we knew what to expect: long trails, maybe some bugs, maybe some bears if we weren't careful. But never people. Not like this. The drive out was beautiful, miles of gravel logging roads winding through thick green trees. At one point we passed a rusty pickup parked at the shoulder. 2 men leaned against it, both staring as we rolled past. One had a long beard, the other a baseball cap pulled low. I gave a friendly wave, but they just kept staring. My boyfriend tried to laugh it off. "Northwood's hospitality," he joked. Still, the way their eyes followed us in the rearview mirror stuck with me. When we finally reached the trailhead, it was empty. Perfect, we thought. We shouldered our packs and started hiking. The air was cool, the bugs surprisingly few. 8 hours later we reached a wooden backpacking shelter along the trail. There was a fire ring out front, but no one else in sight. Instead of sleeping in the shelter, we set our tent about 100 feet back in a clearing, just for privacy. We cooked our freeze-dried meals, shared a little wine from a flask, and watched the stars appear. Away from Wausau's lights, the sky was a riot of constellations. By the time we crawled into the tent, we were exhausted. Usually I wear earplugs when we camp to block out noises, but this night the silence was thick and pure. I thought I'd sleep like a rock. I woke to a sound I can still hear if I close my eyes: thunk thunk, like 2 heavy logs striking together. My boyfriend's eyes were wide in the dim light of the tent. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. The noise came again. Measured. Intentional. Not wind, not animals. Someone was out there hitting wood against wood. We lay frozen, breaths shallow. After a minute, the knocking stopped. Relief began to creep in, until we heard it: voices. Low, male voices, carrying through the still night. We couldn't make out the words, but there were at least 2 of them, maybe more. They weren't approaching, but they weren't leaving either. Neither of us dared unzip the tent. We just lay there, hearts pounding, waiting for footsteps, for a shadow against the nylon. At some point, the voices faded. But sleep never came back. Every rustle, every snap of a twig kept me braced for the tent zipper to slide open. At first light we packed in silence. As we carried our gear to the shelter to grab our food bag, I felt my stomach drop. On the front wall of the shelter, freshly carved into the wood, was one word: kill. The letters were deep, jagged, as if hacked with a knife or axe. Below them, the wall was scarred with fresh blade marks. Wood shavings still littered the ground. My boyfriend swore under his breath. We both looked around, but the forest was still. The only proof of the night before was carved into the shelter like a threat left behind. We didn't talk. We just shouldered our packs and started down the trail, walking fast, glancing back every few minutes. The air felt heavy, like the woods themselves were watching. By the time we reached the trailhead, I thought the worst was behind us. Then I saw the car. Our little sedan sat where we'd left it, but the windshield wiper was raised straight up, and something dangled from it. As we got closer, the smell hit first: blood. Impaled on the wiper blade was the carcass of a squirrel, its fur matted, its body stiff. Blood smeared across the glass in streaks. My stomach lurched. I couldn't bring myself to touch it. We just threw our packs into the trunk, climbed in, and drove. I didn't even clean the windshield until we reached a gas station miles away, where I used newspapers and bottled water to scrape off the mess. The gas station clerk gave us a look, but I couldn't explain. What was I supposed to say? That someone had left us a message in blood and fur? We drove all the way back to Milwaukee that day, hardly speaking. My boyfriend kept checking the mirrors, half expecting to see that rusty pickup following us. We never reported it. What would we have said? That we'd heard knocking, voices, found a word carved in wood, and a squirrel nailed to our car? Maybe it would have sounded like a prank. But in my gut I know it wasn't a prank. I haven't been back to that trail since. Even now, when I walk in the woods near Wausau, I find myself listening, waiting for that sound. Thonk, thonk. And I can't help but wonder if the men with the rusty pickup were out there that night, circling us in the dark, waiting for the right moment to step closer. My name is Daniel, and in my early 20s I worked as a meter reader for the utilities company in Cleveland, Ohio. The job was simple on paper: check water, gas, and electricity meters, record the numbers, move on. But unlike most jobs, this one took me inside hundreds of houses and basements every month. You learn fast that a home's exterior is just a mask. The truth, the raw, unfiltered truth, lives in the basement. I'd seen it all down there. Rats, roaches, animal skeletons, mold climbing the walls like veins. Once I found a coffin, sitting upright in a corner. I told myself it was a prop, maybe a leftover from Halloween. But there was one basement I still can't shake from my mind, because what I found there didn't fit into any box of normal, or even explainable. The house looked ordinary from the outside, a sagging duplex on a block of tired, aging homes near the edge of the city. I entered through the back, found the stairs, and flipped a switch. Nothing. No light. I used the glow of my handheld device, a weak halo barely bright enough to see a foot in front of me. The basement smelled damp, like old wood and something sour underneath. My boots crunched on grit as I shuffled across the room, one hand brushing along the wall. Eventually, the cone of light caught the meters in the far corner. I crouched, scribbled the numbers, and that's when I heard it. A whimper. Low. Fragile. I froze. The sound came from the other side of the basement, behind a locked wooden door. Then came scratching, desperate, frantic scratching, like nails against wood. "Hello?" I called, heart thudding. "Is there a dog in there?" The whimper rose, urgent. I tried the doorknob. Locked. My stomach twisted. Someone had shut an animal down here and left it. Back at the office, I reported it. I couldn't get the sound out of my head. For the next month, whenever I walked into another dark basement, I half expected to hear that same cry. When the route brought me back, I went straight down those stairs, my handheld trembling in my hand. The basement was silent this time. Too silent. I finished the readings quickly, but as I turned to leave, my curiosity gnawed at me. I stepped toward the locked door, leaned close, and listened. At first, nothing. Then it started. Screams. Not words. Not even human in the way you expect. High, piercing shrieks that tore through the dark, dropping into guttural moans, then rising again into a sound like wailing laughter. My skin went cold. I staggered back, stammering. "Hello? Do you need help?" No response, just screams, echoing like an animal tearing itself apart. I bolted. Climbed those stairs 2 at a time and burst into daylight, lungs heaving. I told the office again. Nothing came of it. No follow-up. Just another report filed away. For months I dreaded returning. And when I finally did, I told myself I'd keep my head down, get the numbers, and leave. But this time, as I stepped into the basement, I realized something had changed. The light was on. At the bottom of the stairs, in the yellow glow of a single bulb, stood a dog. Thin, ragged, its ribs showing. Behind it, a pair of bare feet. I froze halfway down. My eyes traveled upward, and there he was. A man. Middle-aged, bald head shining in the dim light, body wiry and restless. His eyes caught mine, wild, jittery, too bright. "I'm with the utilities," I croaked, forcing myself to sound steady. "Just here to read the meters." To my shock, he answered. His voice was off, too loud, the pitch climbing and dropping like a badly tuned radio, but the words made sense. He even tried small talk. For a second I wondered if maybe I'd imagined everything. But as I bent to record the numbers, his behavior shifted. He began pacing. Back and forth, muttering, hands wringing, head jerking like it was on strings. Every few seconds he'd blurt out a sound, a barked, "Oh," or a broken laugh that didn't match the rhythm of our conversation. The longer it went on, the louder he got. I backed toward the stairs, notebook shaking in my hand. He followed. His mutters turned into grunts, then into rising screams, the same ones I'd heard behind the locked door months before. I didn't wait. I spun and sprinted up the stairs, his shrieks chasing me. I slammed through the back door into daylight, gulping air like I'd been drowning. For weeks I avoided that block, trading assignments with coworkers. But one night, while giving a friend a ride home after a concert, she pointed out her new place. My blood turned to ice. It was the same house. When I asked if she noticed anything strange, she blurted out, "Oh, you mean the crazy guy in the basement?" She told me she often heard him yelling at night, voice climbing into manic pitches. Once, she even saw him in the yard, standing motionless, eyes blank, tongue flicking in and out of his mouth like a snake. She said she crossed the street to avoid him. 2 months later, I finally got my answer. While visiting her, we saw flashing lights outside. Police cruisers lined the street. Officers were leading the man from the basement out in handcuffs. My friend's neighbor told us he'd attacked someone with a knife. That was the last I ever saw of him. Sometimes I tell myself he got the help he needed. But other nights, when I think about those screams echoing through the locked door, I'm not so sure. And every time I walk into a dark basement in Cleveland, I half expect to hear them again, rising from the shadows, waiting for someone foolish enough to listen.